So this video is an overview of referencing and how referencing is used within a character pipeline. It's something that I've used quite extensively over several major AAA titles, and it's worked really well. And whenever I sort of explain this technique and this pipeline setup to students or various people, if you don't understand the whole process of referencing, or you don't kind of follow the behaviours of referencing, and you're sympathetic to how referencing works, you can get yourself into all kinds of crazy problems, and I often find that a lot of people then put it in the too hard basket, and then they literally have files where the character model and the skeleton and the rig and the animation is all don't need that, is all embedded within the same file, and it makes it very inflexible, and if changes need to be made to the rig or the character model, then the animation has to be extracted, and it all just gets really messy, and this is something that referencing allows you to be able to do. Okay, so ultimately let's have a look at what are the key features of a character pipeline, and I've just given myself a little colour palette here so that I'm not messing around trying to choose colours. Literally we have the character model, which is Geo, and generally this I literally call it the Geo UVs assorted, textures, etc. Okay, then we send that through the pipeline, and it goes to a rigger who builds a skeleton. And this consists of setting up all the joints, and then applying skin weighting, smooth bind, various techniques, and then from there it will be what I call rigged, which is setting up all the controls and things like IK, FK switching. You know, it could be ribbon spines, it could be world space switching, you know, all kinds of things that allow the animator to easily bring the characters to life. And then ultimately from that stage it then gets passed on to the animator, where animation happens, and let's just say that then it brings character to life. Okay, and then whether you are working in a games pipeline or a render pipeline, you might geocache the animation out and strip all the rig out of it for a nice clean file. Or in terms of games, literally the only thing I want to be sending through into the game engine is the ultimately the kind of skinned character model, and then literally the animations. I don't want kind of messy rigs with constraints and controls in the game engine. I want the game engine to literally be as clean as possible. Okay, Now, traditionally within pipelines, they can be very linear. So the rigger is waiting for the character model to be finished and then sets everything up, and then the poor animator's waiting for all this to be finished, ready to animate. And I've often seen animations kind of all be applied in the same file. It's this single file that just gets passed down the chain, and animation applied and then extracted, and it's very inflexible, and you kind of wait in this guy at the end of the chain kind of has to wait for things to happen. So what I looked at when setting up pipelines was how to make a pipeline as flexible as possible that allowed sort of iterations and characters to be changed wherever possible. Sure, there are limits to the changes, and it's not entirely error-free, but also allows as quickly as possible the rigger to get going and the animator to start animating, and then literally once everybody is kind of doing their thing, while that's happening, the character model is going into complete, being finished, and then that can easily be again passed down the pipeline, and then through to export, whether it's render, or into game engine. Okay. And that's ultimately looking at the core pipeline in a nutshell. And so where does referencing come in? So let's have a look at how referencing pipeline can potentially work. Okay. So I'm just going to get rid of that, and let's start. So based on how we identified the pipeline, oops, and this is where we have what we call the geo file. Now these are my naming conventions, so this could be called model, it could be called geometry. I just have generally got into the habit of calling it geo, and this represents the folder structure. Okay, so excuse my drawings now. So this literally is the geo file. All right. So that's it started to happen, okay, and literally that gets passed to the rigger, who, let's change colour, who will literally start to set up a skeleton. Clavicles, and you get the picture. Okay, and literally I call this the skin. Okay, could call it the bind, could call it the skin weight. It generally doesn't matter as long as I guess it's meaningful. And what we do is this geo file is referenced in. Okay, and referencing is literally this is a separate file. It's being referenced literally to be incorporated in this file, but it stands alone on its own. So when this is referenced in, ultimately the geo file does come with it. Okay, So you get that as part of the reference. Okay, but that's literally been referenced in. Okay, so the rigger sets this up, and literally all we need from the geo at that stage is the character model to be signed off in terms of proportion, so that the rigger knows where to place the joints, and then he can get going. Every time this is updated, the next time this file is opened, because it's referenced in, the latest version comes in. Okay, so literally it's the skeleton is set up and the skin weighting. Skin weight is applied. Okay. Now, literally, I do separate this out as a separate reference process, but the next stage is what I call the rig. And you probably guessed by now, this is referenced in there. Okay, so the skeleton comes in and the geometry comes into this file. So you can have many multi-hierarchy referencing coming into a scene. Okay, and literally the skeleton is duplicated. Yes, I should have copied. But there you go. Let's do it the manual way. Okay, and literally let's do yellow. The rigger is then putting on all the controls, so it's setting it up ready for the animator. Okay, and this in this rig file, this is where you're literally setting up kind of controls, IK, FK switching, which can have kind of you often end up with like 3 arms to kind of switch between, all the constraints, all that kind of thing. So, and the reason I like to separate it off in a separate file is that ultimately what's going in game is these two, so the geo and the skeleton. Okay, I don't want all these crazy controls and constraints going in there. That's literally just something which will drive the skinned character. Okay, and again, because this skin file is referenced into the rig, you get the geo file come with it as well. So again, you get the geo come in with it. Okay. Does it end there? No, it doesn't. So last on the list is the anim. And again, my naming convention, you could call it animation, movement, anything, doesn't really matter. And literally, yeah, you guessed it, that gets referenced in. Okay, and so this is where the rig is given to the animator, and obviously brings the character to life by positioning all the controls. Because it's referencing in the rig, and that's referencing in the skin, and that's referencing in the geo, then literally okay, excuse the drawing. Then I get the full character to work with. Okay. And that literally is a referencing. It's a 4-tier referencing system where the geometry is referenced in a skeleton is built, that's skin weighted. That same skeleton is where the rig is built and all the controls. You can do whatever you like with the rig. It's just purely there to drive the original skeleton, and then the animator references that in and animates the controls. Okay. Now ultimately what that means is that because these are standalone files that are just being kind of pointed to in each file, you can do updates without destroying the animation. Okay. I can make changes, I can totally rewire the rig, as long as I keep the naming convention of the controls the same, then the animation will still stand. Okay, so Maya referencing in that case is a little bit dumb. It relies on naming conventions remaining intact and placement of files. Being consistent. So if this sat on C drive characters and then the folder was geo, then the reference is pointing directly to that folder. If somebody goes and moves it, the referencing breaks because it's looking in this folder and it's no longer there. So the placement of files and folders is critical. And if somebody goes and renames any aspect of the skeleton, it'll break any constraints and anything that the rig was driving it. So names of things are critical as well. So naming conventions and placement of files is absolutely critical. Okay, so that is ultimately referencing in a nutshell. And what we'll do is I'll set up a very simple referencing pipeline with spheres and cubes, and then ultimately we will take all that knowledge and start to build the main Frankie character.